Well, hello. Nice to see some new faces and familiar faces, and to see so many people on Zoom. Um, so, I'm giving my Way Seeking Mind talk today. And to start it off, just to give some context, um, Domyo Burke, who's the Brightway Zen guiding teacher, also has a Zen Studies podcast. She says, without way seeking mind, we never even begin practice. And if we don't nurture and sustain way seeking mind, our practice will wither and die. Buddhism is based on seeking freedom from suffering, greater wisdom and compassion, greater skillfulness in benefiting beings, and a more authentic, connected way of being. Way-seeking mind typically arises because of dissatisfaction. Inevitably, we encounter dissatisfaction in our lives, with ourselves, with others, with our conditions, with the state of the world. So, kind of the first noble truth is that there is dukkha, there is some suffering or unsatisfactoriness. And I like to think about it like ice cream, in that you know what ice cream is when you see it, but there's different flavors. There's some that are very sweet, some that are very bitter, but it's all ice cream. And my story, it's my story, it's my flavor, it's my sort of sweet and bitterness, but hopefully that same inherent dukkha is something that we can all identify with, hopefully you can identify with in your story. So hopefully this will resonate. So I could start this story very early, but I think I'm, from when my mom here gave birth to me, but I'll move ahead. I'll fast forward to when I was aware life was starting to take me towards practice. So in the early 2000s, I was in college. I had great energy and determination in my undergraduate studies to eventually go to medical school, become a doctor. In my first 2 years, I was enrolled in a selective honors degree, was often in the top of my class in the science courses, and had a high GPA. Life, when I was in high school, I wasn't as driven, I wasn't as focused. And then kind of in college, that started to happen. And so to me, life made sense. You work hard, you get good grades, good things are gonna happen. Now I got it all figured out. Like this is what's gonna happen. And so life doesn't always work out like that. So when I was a junior in college, I felt very energized. I completed a summer research program at a local medical school. I had good friends, I had a girlfriend. I was taking my typical classes, and it was 15 credit hours. And I felt like, oh, that's not enough. I need to take more. So I signed up for 21 credit hours. And I noticed, like, you know what? I really don't need a lot of sleep. The need for sleep lessened, and my mind tended to move faster. My speech was faster. I had insights that just seemed to effortlessly come. And I decided, with kind of this time that I have, I'll join student council, I'll join other activities. And there were also kind of more positive feelings. I felt this kind of oneness, kind of accepting and embracing of how things are. So then I was like, wow, things are really coming together. I can see this sort of progress. And that was true until the wheels started to come off. So my mind, its thoughts scattered into many different places. I couldn't hold a thought fully towards its action. My body was restless. If I was doing Zazen at this time, which I wasn't, it would have been impossible to do. I felt like I always had to move, I had to walk, Even if it was like 3 a.m. in the morning, there was this restless discomfort. And then it was listening to class, listening in school and reading. It was far from what I could do at that point. So the analogy I have is sort of like driving a car, and you're usually typically going at about 45, 50, something like that. And then the car speeds up, and now we're going 70, 80. And then when you get to like 100, 120, the car starts shaking. It's kind of out of control. If you see a pebble in the road, you're kind of scared. And then you're like, well, who's driving this car? Like, why is it going this fast? And why can't I kind of... So I remember back then a staff member at the university encouraged, I kind of talk with every day, and she encouraged that I seek help. And I didn't know if I really needed it at that point or didn't, but I trusted her. I trusted that she, she was older and I knew what was happening. So I went to the counseling center, and I was still open-minded. And then I was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So I'll pause here, and I'd like to take a moment to read the 5 remembrances in the Pali Canon, and the Buddha said that we should reflect on these often. So 1, I'm of the nature to grow old. There's no way to escape growing old. I'm of the nature to have ill health. There's no way to escape ill health. I'm of the nature to die. There's no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There's no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. So this remembrance was definitely, there's no way to escape ill health. I withdrew from classes. I spent a semester at home away from my friends. And I remember, I have kind of a vivid memory of my dad, as well as others, but I was just going through books, trying to figure out, what is this diagnosis? What does this mean? And honestly, it didn't look great. I mean, it didn't look, I just sort of am given this, and some studies suggest that around 50% or more of people with bipolar disorder are unemployed. The more episodes you have, the more likely you are to have them. Stress isn't good for this condition. So it wasn't, it was a lot to take in. And I thought, my path going to medical school, residency would be far too stressful, to kind of take on. So what I was doing and what I thought I would become no longer was. There was a problem, and what am I going to do? How are we going to fix this? But then also deeper questions arose. Well, so the future Jess, or me, maybe that person's not going to be who I am now. It's going to be some person that's different. Maybe I wouldn't recognize what I think about, kind of maybe what I internalized from society and the expectations is what you think of as a good or successful life. What will my life be? And it's hard to kind of, let some of that go. And more fundamentally, whose body and mind is this? If it was my mind, I'd be able to control it. And this definitely wasn't in my control at all. I would not have chosen this. So there was a sense of helplessness. And what will my mind be like in the future? And that uncertainty. one thing I knew for sure was that my path was definitely not going to be straightforward. That was clear. Also, we often think about, maybe we often hear like, oh, our goal in life is to be happy or have a happy life. Well, kind of what I was experiencing is called mania, and it's happiness on steroids. I mean, you can, such highs. And also that was terrifying to me too. So I've experienced some highs, and that goal didn't really make sense to me or really suit me. So then, was that maybe a Dharma gate towards dispassion? But I learned that so you would think, I would think so, but then that's sort of nuanced. And I learned that I became really passionate towards not having highs and not having lows, which brought a vigilance, an agitation, a fear, and the Dharma of dispassion, it's one of the steps in the Anapanasati Sutta, which is impermanence, dispassion, cessation, and letting go or liberation. And it's not about suppressing emotions, but about seeing them arise and pass without clinging to them. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and kind of talks about how our past can stay with us, and I think that's still something I work with. So practice. I started a meditation practice in the 2000s by myself, never going to a place of practice, listening to the Dalai Lama to start. He had it was a quote, which I don't exactly remember the specifics of it, but it kind of went along the lines of the key to happiness is discipline. And in the Anapati Sutta, Analayo says that when his commentary on it is that a sense restraint leads to delight and joy. So this discipline, maybe it sounds counterintuitive, but it very much resonated with me, as the impulsivity with mania was very uncomfortable, as well as the recommendations of building a routine, having steady sleep were essential for living well with this diagnosis. So having a discipline made sense. That was my first teaching. I used meditation as an instrument to help me navigate this diagnosis. Learning lessons again. When you're in an intensive and, maybe before you're going to start a session, a meditation session, you have your dinner, and then you find out you ate a lot more than you intended, and then the next 2 hours is very uncomfortable. So in the December intensive, I learned that lesson 3 times. That is, in the February one, I didn't have to learn the lesson, thankfully, but it does take a few times before maybe we learn the lesson, and life as it is, the ultimate teacher. Moving from there, I always appreciated the broader scope of culture anthropology in undergraduate. So I chose to study and obtain a master's degree in culture anthropology in Tampa, Florida. It was a lovely few years. It really wasn't stressful. The weather was great. I had good friends. The content was enjoyable to me. I'd be aware of my stress level. I could take days off if I needed to, kind of just tune in. And I had the space to do that. And I would practice a seated meditation. I'd focus on my breath, more of a concentration practice. I didn't have any psychiatric issues. And I started to think, well, after a few years, I thought, well, I'm older now. Maybe that was just a strange kind of one-off experience. Perhaps I gave up on my my dream path too soon, too early. And you know what? Now I have more tools. I'm more intuitive. I have meditation. it was important for me at the time to use all the abilities that I had. And so I decided at that time to take the MCAT, the medical college admissions test, and then I applied and I entered medical school. So I thought, okay, I'm a little older, I'm a little wiser, and so maybe this all kind of worked out for the best. Well, the first semester went well. The daily requisites that was asked of me, I think in the second semester started to accumulate. And I found the stress, it really wasn't a program where you could just take a couple days off, or, it's sort of like every day we're learning new material and incorporating it. So I think stress was the cause of this second episode that I had in medical school. And it was similar in some ways to the first, but I knew kind of what was happening. And there was more of a depressive element. I was working so hard to finish the semester. And I just couldn't. So meditation as a tool was not serving me as an instrument to meet my academic goals. So, there I am. And Joko Beck has a line where she says, "It's when our lives fall apart that we may finally be willing to look at ourselves. It's when we are no longer shielded by comfortable illusions, when we can no longer deceive ourselves, that we may have the greatest opportunity for growth." So joining a Zen community. So I was at FSU in Tallahassee at the time of this, and when things were very rocky, that was the first time I participated in a meditation group. I took leave and declined the opportunity to return to medical school the following year. I returned home. I knew that the stressful path of medicine is not my way of life. All that effort, all that time, what to do? Wide open, perhaps with a deeper understanding or accepting of myself, and not knowing how to go forward. My mom and I, looking for something, searched for a place to practice meditation. We visited a couple of different places and then found the Houston Zen Center and joined their orientation and introduction to Zen class. I felt grief, I felt confusion, I felt what is my identity now? And I really didn't have confidence in using meditation as a tool to reach my goals. So I guess I could have given up on it. But these larger questions of who am I, what's happening, what do I do, what's going on, trying to understand myself and the world, I continued to seek answers. So my way-seeking mind wanted to be there. And where else was there to go? I remember when I joined Flint's practice discussion group, he said, "Well, why are you joining?" And I was like, "Well, what else is there? What else are we, going to do?" So in a weird way, the doors seemed to close very, very tight, but also in a way open in a very uncomfortable way. If I had my choice, I would have very much preferred the straightforward path. Turning towards difficulties. Who am I now? What will I do? The lesson took hold a little more. Being in groups with other persons who are suffering with mental health issues did provide an opening, a sense of compassion. This is not just me. Similar to what Peg said at the last intensive, people originally come to help themselves, but then see others that are struggling as well. I became interested in studying clinical social work so as to learn more about mental health to benefit myself and others. So a person with a mood disorder jumping into the realm of supporting others with their emotions, is that really wise? I don't know if I thought it all the way through. And I didn't think about the stress of that in itself. What I can say is I definitely was turning towards all of this, not away. And as I soon learned, so many of the social workers, counselors, helpers had their own close experiences that drew them into the field as well. So moving to Austin, I joined Thich Nhat Hanh's. There's a Plum Blossom group, and then there's a Wake Up group, which is a group of young, dedicated practitioners, younger in age. And for some years, they had their own house, regular daily meditation offerings, and I would visit several times a week. Of course, the drama of a group of young people, many living together, still applied. However, it was amazing to see such dedicated people to the practice. And it's clear that practice does not solve all problems. Emotional and relational challenges continue to exist. Being with illness and death. I found a goodness of fit working in hospice care, supporting persons who are dying and their families. Remembrance, there is no way to escape old age, illness, and death. Like Ram Dass stated, there was a clarity and a profound truth of being with those who are dying. Through the years, I gained skill, insight, and how to be in those situations. I loved the work, and I could see improvement in my skillfulness. Stress was definitely there as well. I would get called out in the middle of the night, disrupting my sleep, to problem solve how to meet a person or family's unmet needs. And a lot of sitting, but not sitting. Hospice is about meeting people where they are, and where they are literally. So I would drive a lot to people's homes, hospitals, nursing facilities. So even now when we're driving around town with my partner Jennifer, I'll say, oh yeah, I've been there. So it's sort of, I drove around a lot. All over town. So being in the car, sometimes 1 to 2 hours, then walking a few feet before sitting again with a family, sometimes for long hours. Serious back problems arose again and again. I never thought I would leave this work, but functionally, I just couldn't make it work. Taking off this identity as a hospice worker, what would be my next? So joining the Cognitive Disorder Center. From there, and for over 7 years now, I joined the Cognitive Disorder Center. No more driving long distances. My back problems improved dramatically. Our focus is to serve persons with dementia and their families. I see these roles, they're like coats, these identities of who we are that we take on. We're a child, then we become an adult. If we're a student or a medical student, then a hospice social worker, and then now this. And I noticed our patients were often letting go of roles as well, which was often painful. Maybe the role of being able to drive a car, being a driver, being a lawyer, a professor. Maybe they were always a care provider. Now some of this was not because of their own choosing, had to be let go. I noticed the population I was serving was getting younger. In hospice, there was not as clear a connection for me. Those that were dying did not typically appear to be like me at all, did not look like me. And there was a way my mind could disconnect. So a part that said, well, a younger part maybe that said, well, this won't really happen to me. Being at the Cognitive Disorder Center, it felt closer. And then in 2021, a random accident results in a concussion. Now I am serving persons with a cognitive disorder, and I myself am working through my own cognitive disorder, although more mild. But this feels too close, and lots of underlying questions arose. One day at work, they had a poet meet with each of us individually and have a conversation. And so Jenny Hegland from the Good Listening Project wrote a story and then a poem about our time together. So this is what she wrote. Quote, "When I was younger, my patients were so much different than me," he said. "I never felt like that could be me until recently. This person had been working with older adults his whole life. The health challenges he'd been struggling with over the past year made it easier for him to relate to his patients' experiences, perhaps too closely. It's been rough, but this is where compassion comes from. Realizing there's no escaping it and we're all in the same boat," he said. At the same time, it was difficult to accept that aging and illness were out of his control. Quote, "I don't know what else there is to do but acknowledge it," he said. He shared that he'd been practicing mindfulness and meditation for many years and was currently taking a mindful self-compassion course. He realized that while this practice had been helpful throughout his life, he was being invited to relate to it in a new way. As we closed, he shared the 5 remembrances, which inspired the last 3 stanzas of the poem. "There's sadness in stopping the striving, not trying to fix, but simply being with," he said. And I still feel the sadness in stopping the striving. Poem. So her poem, I'm gonna read an excerpt. Discomfort, now my decoupage, sadness, its sticky glue, a go-to practice since my 20s, even that's lost its use. It was easy to love you from a distance, me the caregiver, never the care receiver. Then one day you snuck up, sneaky like a snake. Wasn't ready to see you. Really? I have to be you? Just this. On some level, I always thought this was going somewhere, meditation. And hopefully I would be enlightened or find a way to deep inner peace and away from uncomfortable emotions. That was the hope. The concussion brought back feelings and fears. The concussion of 2021 brought back feelings and fears from 2008. I felt such a loss. I see the limitations of practice more clearly. That part of me that wanted practice to achieve a goal, it was despondent. Working in a cognitive disorders clinic, I see that mental abilities are a gift. We don't control them, and when those abilities are being lost, it can significantly impact anyone's practice. That part of me wanted to see a continuous rise to enlightenment. I look at our senior teachers, so sharp, such executive functioning. These gifts are necessary components for practice and teaching. I also see persons in our clinic, even Zen practitioners, which that can be another identity or coat that we wear, that have significant executive dysfunction, who are not able to cook, sit, or drive any longer, let alone teach. So the Buddha, the first noble truth. Now this, monks, is the noble truth of dukkha. Birth is dukkha, decay is dukkha, death is dukkha, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. Association with the unbeloved is dukkha. Separation from the loved is dukkha. Not getting what is wanted is dukkha. In short, the 5 clinging aggregates are dukkha. And we have the 5 skandhas later this week, a little intensive there, so you can still sign up. So the decay is dukkha. Decay is that unwelcome change that's also called deterioration. And deterioration is the running down and falling apart, which must take place in everything which is put together. All the compounded things of this world must decay and eventually come to cessation. So I think this practice suits me as it starts with this truth, and I can totally buy into that unsatisfactoriness, acknowledging suffering when it's there. There's no sort of promise of something to start. It's just, this is something I've noticed about how the world is. So at the December intensive, I talked about the 3 marks of existence, and I used this Theravadan monk, Jnana Taloka. The part I want to include here is when he talks about parts of decay and decline. So he says, third is the decline of the mind. Memory falters, thoughts wander, where the mind no longer understands things clearly. In the first case, with the decay of limbs and organs, even with the second case, failure of the senses, though there may be physical pain, it does not follow that the person affected becomes miserable. But with the decay of the mental function's ability to choose the ways of Dharma, which lead away from dukkha, are limited. And with that lack of understanding, dukkha cannot be avoided. Dukkha cannot be avoided. Understanding this logically is one thing, but emotionally it's very saddening. That part of me was so saddened to accept this. Really? We can't escape this? And if a concussion can happen at random, the world doesn't seem so secure. And this belief that I had is shattered. What is there to strive for? What am I doing? I had support from many at Appamada during this difficult time. I would meet with Peg regularly, and Jennifer would notice that days I would speak to her, my spirit was a bit lifted. Some part of me had this belief that I was striving for something. All the work and efforts would result in growth as the outcome. Like in school, we strive to reach a goal. And we're taught that good grades would mean a good college, and good college would mean a good job and a good life and away from pain and this linear illusion, but life is far more complex than that. And that part was terribly disappointed. I asked, if that is not true, then what is all this for? What is the point? And one day I recall expressing this to Peg with probably some angst behind it. And she said, just this. I remember looking out my window and it hit my gut. Just this. No more. All I can have, may have, is just this. Such sadness to let go of the striving belief, but some of the weight was gone in letting it go. Perhaps this life is not about accomplishing or enlightening. It is just this. I'll say, of course, in 2025, that striving part is still around, I'm sure, and I'm more aware of it. Poker. So a lot of this was overwhelming to my body and mind, and at renovating a house at the same time. I felt I needed something as a distraction. I needed some distance. And that striving part that was such a motivator to practice, it wasn't so motivated anymore. I also had the belief that I, quote unquote, needed to sit for me, for my mental health. I heard a teacher tell a student to take a break from sitting, as they had sat daily for such a long time, to experiment with what that was like. I thought that sounded like a great idea. I tried it myself. And I realized the sky didn't fall down. I was okay. This is an option. This is a choice. It's not a need. Enter poker. In one of Flint's practice discussion groups, I remember talking with excitement about how some of the principles of reality in this life can also be found in poker. One, interdependence. Every action, even small ones like timing tells, impact every other action of the table. Therefore, each of us sitting has an impact on each other that is clear to see. Two, cultivating discipline. Poker takes tons of discipline, lots of patience, hours of sitting, sometimes doing nothing. I was very well trained for this. Appropriate action. What is the next appropriate action here? Applying Joan Halifax's, who is a Paya Zen teacher, grace, a focus which was a focus for support professionals, family caregivers, and I found it really helpful in my play, which was gathering our attention, recalling my intention, attuning to self and other, considering all serve, engaging and ending the encounter. So grace is a mnemonic. A practice edge, noting and noticing greed and delusion. Greed, facing it in each hand. Delusion, not accurately assessing your abilities, a lack of awareness in the abilities of others. Growth occurs on the edges of comfort, and this seemed like a reasonable training ground. Of course, I'm not endorsing gambling, just saying this is what, came up for me. And also in poker, everything is heightened, including my heart rate. So my favorite part was listening to my parts. When hundreds of dollars are at stake on every hand, my heart rate would go higher. I just couldn't help it. But also these times of tension made it much easier to hear my parts. The scared part, the entitled part. I had opportunities to turn towards these parts, hear their stories, comfort them at times, and then make the next appropriate action. I remember the joy of winning a big tournament early on, when in the later stages, I was really attuning to my parts, which definitely changed some of the decisions I made. So I remember, when you get to the later stages, somebody makes a big bet. There's a feel for parts like, oh my gosh, oh no, they must have it. I don't want to get a part of this. Maybe I'll wait. And then I could kind of hear that fear, hear that nervousness, and then question, okay, yeah, that could be the case. What is happening? Is he maybe he's making a bet to shove me off of this hand. And so creating that space was the next, allowed me to kind of think about what is the next appropriate action. And I made this myself after I won that tournament. I made a trophy. So it's a poker trophy, and then I titled it August 2020 Poker Champion, and then facing fear and parts with grace. So anyways, there's that. There you go. Downsides of poker. Well, it's very self-serving. It's not really serving others, although I am on a poker podcast and it does reach few people. Two, while these beautiful attributes are embedded within the game, to become and stay a winning player, one must focus on the technical aspects of the game. Players as a whole have improved significantly over the past 10 years. There's more books out, poker solvers, access to coaching, YouTube, and I almost didn't believe it. Jennifer reminded me like a couple weeks ago that I read this book that was just about, you get 2 cards in No Limit and Hold'em. You get 2 cards and you can get a white, just like a 52 card deck. You get Ace 3, Jack 10, Ace Jack, pocket 4s, 4-4, whatever. And I read an entire book on one hand, one possibility of hands, and there's so many combinations, and optimizing Ace King. And I read this whole, I can't believe I did that. So, and there's notes, so I did the whole thing. So getting to so much in the technical, you kind of lose that broader perspective, I think. And I did notice, when it gets more technical, there was less joy, and less joy without that, without practice kind of infusing it. So wrapping up here, no gift, no giver, no receiver. This is a state where distinctions between separate entities dissolve. The idea that all things are transient, impermanent, and lack a fixed identity. Letting go of the role of caregiver, and likely the safety inherent in that role, is at some point an inevitable and challenging practice. Often, as I would need to cancel appointments at times, my clients would check in with me as I with them. While working with clients at that time, I often felt bolstered and supported, a sense of compassion and togetherness, and an embodied insight that suffering is not necessarily personal, but something that exists as a part of this world, something we will all face. If I felt well enough, I looked so forward to those visits. A few months ago, I had a client who was discussing enlightenment. This was a week before the December intensive of Barriers and Pathways of Enlightening Activity with Kim and Lori. I thought, well, I should sign up to have more material to discuss with him. So this would serve him. I got so much of it though for myself, so who was the giver there? And then I had a student intern this semester. I signed up for the Right Use of Power workshop, but then I found out it was only for council members. And then I was offered to join council. So I was able to receive this wonderful training and also develop deeper connections within the Sangha. I'm the instructor, she is the intern, but who really was the giver and the receiver? In the December intensive, we discussed if you only had 6 months to live, what would you do? It definitely wasn't focusing on long-term slow gains over time and long hours in the poker realm. Family and friends, curiosity about what this life is and experiencing it, still working, but definitely less for more balance. And to end, through this, I was listening to a lot of way-seeking mind talks. And I'll share a portion. So that's great. So Stephanie's here. So I'll share a portion. Stephanie shared this at her practice discussion group, and Joan heard it, and then Joan brought it to her way-seeking mind. So I'm going to read a portion of this. The Big Dance by Joe Zarantinello. There is nothing wrong with you. I repeat, there's nothing wrong with you. This chaos in your life is absolutely normal. It's just constant change. It's just the way things are. And the moment you begin to recognize that this chaos is simply just part of the universe, that you are meant to be in it totally, but not of it, only then can you begin to glimpse the great mystery. So thank you all for coming to this Way-Seeking Mind Talk. I'm happy to field comments and questions, and I hope some of it was of use.
Well, I'll make a quick comment. The very beginning when you said, was talking about how important seeking is to our practice. And somewhere early on, I'd gotten the idea that seeking was for newcomers and then we advance from that. And it was such a gift to hear that seeking is what life is all about. That's what makes us curious. I really liked that. And it was such a gift to hear that from him again. It's so meaningful to me.
Thank you, Jess. It was beautiful, and I think what really spoke to me was this existential crisis that we all go through, probably multiple times, and just who am I? Who am I? If I'm not that, who am I? And who am I going to be? And I really appreciated just the way you presented that. It really spoke to me. So thank you for that.
We have Rosemary.
Jess, thank you so much for your talk and your sharing your journey with us. Yeah, as Leslie said, that we're, sharing that we all struggle. And I am curious what, in preparing this talk, what it was like for you to put this together and be so open about your own suffering, as well as your the ways that you've managed and survived and thrived. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. When I signed up for it, I thought, okay, way seeking mind talk, sure, I can do that. And what I noticed is that I could only write for an hour. I could only write for an hour before it got like a little too much, a little too close. Like it was a lot, it's like I don't often think about, what happened 20 years ago and 10 years ago and all of that. And then kind of, so I really needed to kind of space this apart. And it was a challenging practice. I was so glad to share it. I'm so glad today happened because I so glad today is here now because I didn't want to hold on. I mean, I wanted to kind of like release this. And so yeah, that's thank you for your question.
Suzanne?
There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Jess. That was really a very, very moving talk and disclosure, self-disclosure. Takes a lot to share as deeply as you have and as with a very, very complex path. You've been through a lot for someone of still tender years to some of us. So I thank you for that. I look forward to meeting you for a tea, a head student tea when that happens. I'm curious about. I'm not clear about what the role of poker is in your life at this point, and where are you now with all of these things? What is life right now for you, and where are you with with everything and with practice?
Yeah, so the last time I've been to like a card club was November. With poker, I felt like I had to play every week to maintain to be a winning player. And I, I think also with like work and there's like a little bit more, I've started this small private practice as well. So there's a little bit too much to kind of give that 10 hours a week every week to poker. And
Mhm.
then it's still like something is still to me like a beautiful game. I still have people that are connected to it. So with poker, my hope is to like maybe um, like go with friends or do a poker trip for like a week. And so I can enjoy it, but then I don't see myself going back into that usual pattern and then just really thinking about, so right now, where I am is, where am I? Uh, I usually days are, go to work and at the same clinic that I started, was with 7 years ago. And then I come home to Jennifer, my partner. I see my parents. I'll usually spend like one night a week over there. And I come here, and that's kind of where I am right now.
Mm, mm. Well, one of the things that really struck me was how your way-seeking mind has been evident through all the things that you have been through and done. That it's clearly a big driver for you, a real core part of who you are, in the same way that the achievement and accomplishment part is. And it's an interesting combination to separate out those two, I think. That it seems like way seeking is winning in a sense. That seems to be really becoming more clear as a driver for you. So
Mm,
anyway, thank you for sharing that. It was very touching.
thank you. I look forward to tea.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.